Hello, everybody, and welcome into another season preview show here on the Hockey Writers YouTube channel. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and we are on to the Carolina Hurricanes as we continue previewing the upcoming 2024-25 season. Got Zach Martin here, second year in a row. We're doing the preview for the Hurricanes. So how's it going?
Doing good. Can't complain. It's always good to talk hockey, especially when it comes to the Carolina Hurricanes. But yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's we're recording in August, but I mean, when you
Yeah.
guys are watching, this will be September. So we're still, we're the hopefully hockey is gonna come quickly because it seems like
Yeah.
it just keeps dragging and dragging and talking previews rather than hockey. And I
Yeah.
like it when hockey's on TV and we can actually talk about stuff happening, not what's going to happen. So
Yeah, it's definitely a lot nicer in terms of writing where it's like, okay, here's like kind of what happened and stuff like that instead of being like, okay, who might make the team? What could the lines look like? No, it'll be nice when it's like, oh yeah, this is what happened and this is what we're previewing. But yeah,
yeah.
we're definitely in the dog days of summer where it's like, all right, I'm kind of over summer now. Let's get into hockey
Yeah.
season at this point.
Well, I mean, the Hurricanes had another great season. I didn't go far in the playoffs. They seem to hit a wall. Second round seems to be the wall they keep hitting. I got
Yeah.
eliminated by the New York Rangers this past playoffs. I
Mhm.
had a really pretty stacked team if you look at what the forward group looked like, and they were Stanley Cup. I don't know favorites, but they were in the conversation.
Mhm.
Unfortunately didn't get to the final. Um, at all. But I mean, they've still got a pretty strong team going into this season. The draft, they didn't. I mean, there's not a lot to talk about the draft. It's they were a top team. They didn't have a really good pick. Um,
Yeah.
so and they were doing trades around the deadline too. So it's like there that's not really a conversation for what happened last season. But yeah,
Yeah.
second in the Metro. I mean, that Metropolitan Division is one of the toughest
Mhm.
apart from the Atlantic, which is also tough.
Yeah.
Finished second, and they seem to always be in a dogfight with the New York Rangers at the top of that Metro, and it's going to be
Yep.
that way again this season. So let's jump in to what the team looks like right now. I mean, doesn't look like there's probably going to be many more changes as we go in. The forwards, of course, still led by Sebastian Aho. It had a few changes though. Jake Gensel no longer with the team.
Mhm.
They tried to re-sign him, obviously, didn't happen. Had to trade him to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and of course, he signed there long term. So, what do you think about this new forward group? I mean, there are some new faces in amongst the incumbents. Uh, so, what do you think about this new, maybe revamped forward group here?
I think it's pretty good. I mean, you kind of knew change was coming at some point because, like, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and still get the same result. So I kind of figured there was going to be some change, especially when some guys were looking at some raises and stuff like that. So, Teuvo Teravainen goes to Chicago get for the same amount of money. I don't think the Kings were going to match that. It sounded like he wanted to go back to Chicago. I mean, in terms of the other forwards, Steph Nason got a huge raise. He's going to the Devils, kind of makes sense, and he did really well. But honestly, though, you get Jack Roslovic at a pretty decent deal. I think a very underrated player that I think a lot of people kind of forget about because he, did pretty decently on some mediocre Blue Jackets teams. He scorched the Kings in the playoffs, unfortunately. A lot of assists, especially in game six where he had three helpers. So it's kind of like it's good to have him on our team this time. But so I'm
Yeah.
interested to see how he does. William Carrier, you bring in some, Stanley Cup winning caliber, fourth line guy, analytical darling, someone who's your Steph Nason replacement. So overall, I think it's pretty good. You did bring back Martin Necas back to try to see, can you live up to your $6.5 million instead of your 3 million? So that's definitely gonna be an interesting part for him. They bring Jack Drury back to on an extension, a pretty decent deal as well. I think at 1.725, I believe, or something like that. So it's under 2 million. I still think there's probably at least if maybe one more move, if anything, in terms of the affords. Maybe they bring in like maybe a James Van Riemsdyk to fill out your top six, or maybe they use one of the prospects to fill out that spot as well. It'll be very interesting to see how that works out too. Of course, Jesper Fast hasn't really been cleared yet, so he might start the season on IR. So maybe like a Eric Robinson, one of the other new guys, might be filling into the slot in one of the roster spots too. Brind'Amour is an extra as well. They signed him to a 1 year deal. So yeah, I think overall it's a pretty decent forward group. Did it take a step back in the forward area? Maybe a little bit, but I mean, like you said, every year they're in the dogfight with the Rangers. I still think they're gonna make the playoffs. Will they win a division? I guess we'll see, but I think it's nice having a season where it's like it's a transition year and it's not a lot of expectations aren't going to be high like it was last year. So for me, it's kind of like we'll see how the season goes, and I still think they're going to make the playoffs regardless. It's
Mm,
just what's going to happen with the four group, and I still think there's probably some minor moves if anything else. I don't think there's going to be any like splashes. And
mm,
plus, they're still waiting for Seth Jarvis to get signed. Of course,
yeah.
when this comes out, he might be signed. So who
Yeah.
really knows? But yeah, I think the deal's going to get done on that regardless too. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how the forwards look this year,
Mm.
especially with where we're kind of at compared to last year.
Yeah, I mean, losing Teravainen, who's been a pretty big part of the team these past few seasons since he came over
Mhm.
from the Blackhawks, who we went back to,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
funny.
yeah,
And he was a pretty big part of the team, so we'll see
Mhm.
how they kind of move on from him. Obviously, I mean, Gensel wasn't there for a very long time, but he seemed to
No.
fit right in to
Mhm.
the group, and we'll see how that kind of, like I say, didn't really play a long. It wasn't the whole season, so really,
Yeah,
is it going to make that big of a difference when you're looking
right.
at it? But I mean, obviously, they would have loved to have to keep him. But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when, you kind of, see you give them initial price, they give you a counter offer, you accept it apparently, and then things change and, I guess just wanted an extra $1 million and there you go. So, I mean, at least the Hurricanes are smart, at least got something back out of it. So you got a third
yeah.
rounder. It's you got some retention back at least. Plus you re-signed Ty Smith, so you kind of kept one of the guys in the deal. So it's not the most ideal thing, but yeah, that's hockey for you.
Yeah. I mean, there was always the chance that he could be a rental, and that ended up being the
Yeah.
case.
Mhm.
And you just move on from it.
Right.
All right, moving to the defense, who again, there's quite a few changes here.
Mhm.
Brett Pesce being one of the bigger guys leaving, and that seemed to be the writing on the wall pretty quick. That he was going to go to the Devils, and that's what ended up happening. He signs with the
Yeah.
Devils, and they kind of replace him with Sean Walker
Mhm.
coming in from the Avalanche, and then you also got Shane Gostisbehere coming back
Yeah.
too. So you got two
Yeah.
guys that are replacing a couple bodies. So what do you think about this defense? I mean, again, led by Jacob Slavin, he
Mhm.
is the bedrock of this defense when you're looking at
Mhm.
it.
Uh-huh.
And then you've got, of course, Brent Burns still around. You got Jalen Chatfield, who was re-signed,
Mhm.
and he's been a really solid part of this defensive core. Overall, I think this group still looks really good, even with Pesci gone. What do you think about the defense core right now?
I think the defense core is maybe a tad better in my opinion too, and even cost control is a lot better too. Because you look at Brady Shea, he left for Nashville for a 7x7. The Hurricanes are going to give a contract like that. Like same thing for Vincent Trocheck when he left for the Rangers. Guys around that age who want that much money, you're talking 29, 30, and then by the time that contract's done, you're looking at mid 30s. How's that really looking for $7 million? And yeah, Jacob Slavin's about the same age, but he got 8 years, but it's 6.4. So, and that really works out well. You're talking like he's one of the most elite defensive defensemen in the game, probably a
Mhm.
top one, in my opinion, and someone who should be winning some Norrises, but that's here or there because we all know how the Norris
Yeah.
works. But no, again, Sean Walker, I think was a really good move. There's your Brett Pesce, replacement, like you said. Shane Gostisbehere is your Brady Shea. Even Gostisbehere had more points than Brady Shea in terms of how the last season looked. You're talking 56 points, 10 goals, 46 assists, and we kind of saw what he did with the Hurricanes the first time in a short stint. But you bring him back for 3 seasons, $3.2 million. Sean Walker at 3.6, and like you said, Jalen Chatfield at 3 million for 3 years, and the first 2 years are no trade clauses, and I think it's a 10 or 15 team in his last year. So you're talking three guys on defense that you just paid less than $10 million, where Shane and Pesh are making 12 and a half with their
Mhm.
teams combined. So yeah, you found your replacements that are both younger for the most part. I know Sean Walker's like 26, played with the Kings and the Flyers, did really well there too. And like you said, Colorado. So you're kind of getting younger replacements at reasonable contracts, a lot less than what those two got. And you bring back Jalen Sheffield, who played really well the last couple of seasons, especially last year with Dmitry Orlov. You can't really beat that when you sign three guys to your defensive core for less than $10 million and you got Jacob Slavin back for less than 6.5. And then you look at next year, Matt, you got Brent Burns and Dmitry Orlov coming off the Bucks, and you're
Mhm.
talking at minimum $10 million coming off, and you still got four of your six defensive core signed up for at least 3 seasons. And Jacob Slavin's contract kicks in next year. So you got 9 more years of him. You got, I think, 5 years of Sean Walker. So you're going to like 4 years left starting next year, and then 2 years left of Ghost and Chatfield. So you're looking pretty good, honestly, if you're the Hurricanes going into next season. And there's a lot of UFAs. I know this is like way down the road, but there's a lot of UFAs coming up next year that the Hurricanes could be looking out for. But in terms of this year, I think they're just a tad better in terms of with the cost control, production out of the guys they brought in and bringing back Chatfield. Honestly, I think the defense still looks really good. I still think Ghost is a little bit farther ahead in terms of development with the system than Walker is. It's just you gotta kind of shed what you learned in Detroit, come back to Carolina. But with Tim Gleason as your defense coach, I think you're pretty in good hands too. And then looking at a seventh defenseman, I mentioned Ty Smith. I think he'd be a good seventh defenseman if they really need it too. And they also signed Riley Stillman, who is the son of Corey Stillman, who won the Stanley Cup with the Hurricanes back in 05-06, who's got some experience, with the Buffalo Sabres and the Rochester Americans. So I think overall you're kind of pretty decently set for the defense, at least in terms of what your seventh D-man could be, depth defense, and what your I think you're pretty much locked in six is going to be. I think we know who the six are, and it's those guys. And that's just who's your seventh. And you got your defensive depth in Chicago, which is also nice having an AHL affiliate
Oh
again,
yeah.
which is kind of nice. So you kind of just can just stash those guys down there in Chicago. And of course, the Bloomington Bison in the ECHL is a working agreement since they're technically the Rangers affiliate down there. But overall, I like the defense. Like I said, I think they're a tad better just with cost control and production that you've seen from those guys in on other teams compared to last year too.
Yeah, it is a still really good defense core. I mean,
Mhm.
when you look at the top six
Yeah,
group there, and then I mean, even your seventh defenseman is probably is going to be a pretty good seventh too. So,
yeah,
and the one thing about the Hurricanes, they always play that really great structured system. They can have a no-name defense. They don't have a no-name defense, but I think they could have a no-name defense and still be pretty good.
yeah.
Just the way they play.
Hmm.
So overall, I think still the defense is good. I agree with you too.
Yeah,
All right, goaltending didn't change, except Antti Ranta, obviously unrestricted free agent. He
hmm,
had not re-signed. He's still a free agent as we're
yeah.
talking right now.
Hmm.
You got Freddie Andersen and Pyotr Kochetkov
Hmm.
as the tandem. Now, the question is, who do you think should it be a tandem, or should Kochetkov be the guy moving forward this season?
Well, I know if people have been keeping up with us over at the Hockey Writers, I did write an article not so long ago about Pierre Kochetkov maybe being that guy for the Hurricanes next season, even if it is in a tandem. I think if you go, here's your legitimate starter, I still think it's Pierre Kochetkov. If you go tandem style, like how we saw at the end of last year, where Freddie comes back after missing 40 games doing a blood clot issue, the Hurricanes swapped him and Kochetkov off every game for the rest of the regular season for 20 games, and they did pretty well together. Coming into this year, you already know it's a transition year. Anderson's coming into his last year of his 2-year deal. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. I could probably see him walking at the end of next season, and then you kind of look where your depth is at that point too. I mean, you still got Spencer Martin, who you did
Hmm.
resign for less than I think it was less than $800,000. He's probably going to be in Chicago next year, so maybe you got some time with him down there. Maybe he comes up at some point, or maybe he's your backup next year, or there's someone else down the wings as well. But I think this is probably going to be more of a tandem season just that way because they know they got 2 more years of Kochetkov after this year. He's going into year two of his 4-year deal. So I think a tandem is probably the best option to go with if they're not really fully ready for him to be like the guy for, let's say, 50 games and stuff like that. So I still think you could get a nice little tandem out of it. But I think Kochetkov kind of has to be that 1A because he played a bulk of the games last year because Ronto was struggling Of course, that's with the defense struggling too. But Spencer Martin came in, did what he needed to. But Kochetkov played a majority of the season in net, and overall, I think he did pretty well. And had the best save percentage of all rookie goalies last year. I think it was like a .911. So honestly, it was still pretty good. The goals against average is still really solid as well. But if you're asking me, Matt, how it's going to be, I should think it's a tandem, but Kochetkov should be that 1A in my opinion.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, the thing is Andersen still, he's shown he can still, he's still one
Yeah.
of the better
Yeah.
goalies in the league.
Hmm.
I was really happy when he came back from that because that's a scary injury
It really is.
to
Yeah.
have. And hopefully that's done and it's in
Mhm.
this past and he can move forward from it.
Mhm.
But he sure looked good in the playoffs. He sure looked good when he came back. So I
Yeah.
think a tandem, as long as he's playing well, I think is
Mhm.
still a good idea at this point. You don't want
Yeah.
Kochetkov to be playing a ton, I think.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I think a
So
perfect 1A, 1B kind of like you're almost 41-41 would probably be a good option. Even if it's like 45 in the
yeah.
wherever that difference is, I think that's kind of still not bad either. Yeah. Anything north of 50, I think you're kind of leaning on him a little too much, especially with Andersen, how much he makes. And like you said, he did really well last year. He came back, won like 7 straight games, had a couple
Mhm.
shutouts in the middle of that too. Playoffs did pretty good for the most part. I know the Rangers series kind of wants game 6 back, but no, I think overall goaltending should be very interesting for the Hurricanes this year.
Yeah, I think so too.
Hmm.
All right. Now looking at the division, we mentioned the Rangers being going to be probably going, you're going to be fighting with them, but you still got a few other great teams in the Metro Division that
Yeah.
seem to be interesting. You got the Islanders, which seem to be an interesting team every season, and you don't know what to expect from them.
Yeah.
And they were third in the division this past one season. So you've got some other teams that are kind of, I don't know, the Blue Jackets. I don't think they're still probably going to be ending up towards the end, bottom
Yeah.
of the division.
Mhm.
But again, you don't know with some of these teams. Where does Carolina stack up? Are they still in that top two, or do you think they take a step back here?
Well, I think they're still gonna make the playoffs regardless. Honestly, I do see them coming in at number 2 just because of the defense is still kind of there. Like we already talked about the forward court. I think it's gonna be very interesting how the forward group does, and if the goaltending stays healthy, which has kind of been a question mark, especially with Freddie Anderson, because every year he's been kind of hurt at one point or another. And if Kochetkov could take that next step, I still see them finishing second. It all depends on how New Jersey does, because New Jersey,
Yeah,
we all were high up on them last year, and then I think it's just injuries kind of plagued them. Goaltending was not great. So if everyone stays healthy, and of course their additions of Steph Nason and Brett Pesci, I think is going to go a long way. Oh, and they also got Jacob Markstrom
yeah.
too, so that's gonna be very. I still see them finishing number 2. At worst, I guess to see them finishing third, just because of New Jersey kind of stacking up with the goaltending that they really needed, and also adding some pieces from the Hurricanes. So I think 2 or 3 might be their best spot to finish division wise. Maybe if by some weird happenstance the Hurricanes just stay hot and don't cool off, and maybe the Rangers kind of take a step back too, because I know they lost a lot of guys. I don't think they really replaced a whole lot in terms of that too. So anywhere between 2 and 3 is probably their spot this year. But who knows? Anything can happen where they might take the division just in case of
Mm.
weird happenstances, because it's the NHL. Anything can happen. I mean, the Islanders, like you said, all they did was get Anthony Duclair. I don't see very much of a change in terms of what they've done. I mean, they're already cash strapped regardless
Mhm.
of how it was looking for them. They only really got him because of the fact that the Flyers just absolutely just disappeared.
Mhm.
I don't. I think the Flyers kind of really they played over their heads a lot last year, and goaltending hasn't really changed on how they're going to do. So, in terms of I don't really know anyone else is really going to fight for a spot. I don't know how Washington's going to be. You got PLD, okay.
Mhm.
I don't know. I still think the Penguins are. Who knows what's
Yeah.
going on with the Penguins at this point? Yeah, I think the Hurricanes are going to make the playoffs. They're going to be in the top 3 team, at worst 3, at best 2, but they could take the division. Just all really depends. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's a transition year, so I could see a little bit of a step back. Maybe you're taking They finished with 111 last year. I could see them finishing with like 105 to 109 possibly. So
Yeah.
I guess we'll see.
It's a weird division. There are a lot of uncertainties with some of the teams. Like
Yeah.
you don't know what's going to be with the Blue Jackets too. I mean, they could surprise. They got now a stable coach. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully. And a
Yeah.
lot of their young
Go.
guys
Yeah.
could take a step forward too. I mean, it all
That's
depends on how well Dean Evison can kind of gel with the right away as a new
yeah.
coach. So
And you got to help a lot of guys stay healthy, and you got to hope goaltending works out for the Jackets too, because that never really
that's
changed
another
for
one. Yeah.
them. Yeah, so it'll be very interesting for sure. It's yeah, the division is definitely weird when you look outside of like the top, maybe like Rangers, Devils, Hurricanes, maybe Islanders. After that, it's kind of a crapshoot for the bottom four. So
Yeah.
it'd be
We'll
very
see. That's
interesting.
gonna be an interesting division to watch. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, for sure.
All right. Let's go to our quick fire. These are just quick off the cuff.
Mhm.
As you can yeah, not huge explanations, but
Mhm.
not one word answers either, but
Right,
quick
yeah,
quick
yeah,
fire.
yeah, yeah.
All right. First one. What's the biggest storyline question mark going into this season for the Hurricanes?
Goaltending. I think that you got to hope Freddie Andersen stays healthy all year, and if not, you do have Spencer Martin who played really well in the 5 games they played with the Hurricanes last year. If he needs to come up and do something, and you got to see if something does happen with him, you got Pierre Kochetkov, and hopefully he can ride a good amount of games like we talked about, 50 plus. It'll be very interesting. But yeah, right now gotta hope that the healthy goaltending kind of stays there for the Canes because it kind of bit them early last in the early part of the season last year and kind of had to make up for it as the season went on. So just gotta hope everyone stays healthy and that stays rock solid.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good one.
Mhm.
Or one or two breakout stars.
Oh geez. I'm hoping for a breakout season from Jack Drury. He had a career year last year, 8 goals, should have been more. He had 2 or 3 taken back off of him. 27 points overall. Not bad for a guy who played fourth line all year. Did play second line center for the playoffs. I think he did pretty well there too. He did get 5 points in 11 games. 4 of assists, but still though pretty good overall. So I'm curious to see what he does with his new contract as well, 1.7 over the next 2 years. I'm kind of hoping he breaks out, kind of shows what he can do. It's not much of a breakout, but I'm kind of hoping for a bounce back in Jesperi Kotkaniemi, just because
Hmm.
he's kind of been struggling the last couple of years, especially last year. But if you're talking about, I'll give you one extra breakout star. Seth Jarvis did have a career year last year. We did get 67 points. He did that with a torn labrum and and a torn rotator cuff for over 60 games. I think if he's actually fully healthy and he sticks to the first line with Aho and Svechnikov, I can see this guy eclipsing at least 80 points
Mm.
next year. So I know he's already a star, but I think he hits superstar status
Oh,
next year. Yeah.
well, everyone knows how I feel with Seth Jarvis. I love him. He's
Yeah. So
one of my
great.
favorite players outside of the team I cover. So I mean, yeah, he's a
Yeah.
great player. I think, and that what's crazy is that he did play with that injury for
Yeah.
60 plus.
Yeah.
I think, how do you
Like,
do that? I don't know.
yeah, he's wearing a harness and everything. I think he got hurt in like game 15 and somehow played the rest of the year with just I'm like, how is it even possible that
Yeah,
you played that much and played that well for a career year with everything that's torn? Like
yeah.
like a rotator cuff is not easy to
No,
deal with. So more power to this kid for how good he is. So yeah, it's gonna be wild how he does this
yeah,
year. But I think you're looking at superstar status with 80
yeah.
plus points out of Seth this year.
I see it too. I'm interested to watch for that. All right, you mentioned Kotkaniemi as being a bounce back. Is he the one that needs to bounce back the most? I mean, his contract is pretty big. There was talk about him potentially being traded. Could happen still, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, is he the guy?
Yeah, if he's the guy, I know a lot of people talk about buyouts, and you're talking $836,000, or I think it was like 12 seasons. And let me tell you, Tom Dundon is not a guy who wants to pay someone $836,000 for the next 12 years to not play for his team.
Mhm.
A trade, that's gonna be kind of tough, and I don't even think they even want to retain either. Because if you're talking 20, even if you're talking 50%, that's still what $2.4 million. That's still That's a
Yeah.
lot more than the buyout. So yeah, they're really hoping that he kind of comes back and breaks out of the slump he was in last year. Played a lot of second line minutes, so yeah, you're getting paid that much money, and you're hoping to be the second line center. Yeah, you kind of need to have a bounce back in the season, in my opinion. So yeah, KK the Kotkaniemi is that guy.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the thing is it's interesting how well he started his career, and he's kind of, I don't know, plateaued, or I don't know what it is, but
It's been weird. Like the season before, he had a really great season. He had almost 50 points. It's just last year was just a weird season for him, honestly.
yeah.
So hoping it's just one of those weird one-offs, but I don't know. It'll be very interesting. Yeah. When you talk about the contract that he has, we're making 4.8 and it's over 8 years. Man, you guys start earning that 4 point. I know
Oh
well, I
yeah.
know we're not looking for like 70 to 80 points, but give us 45, 50 a year, and we'll
Yeah.
take that. We'll take that for $4.8 million.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, someone that could be an X factor this season. I guess not just a player, but just something during the season that could be X factor.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of tough. I mean, I would say probably an X factor. I'm kind of looking at Shin Gossespierre and Sean Walker,
Mm,
kind of being like those guys that I think Shin Gossespierre could be like your power play one replacement of Brady Shea because they need a guy who can. Brent Burns he's done all right, but I think he kind of needs to take a step back and probably be on the power play two group. And I think you've put Shin Gossespierre at PP1. I think he'll really click on that line. I think that's just you really need a high end offensive defenseman to kind of lead the way because the Hurricanes do play defense out in terms of transitions and stuff like that. So I think if Shane Gossespierre can be that guy for the offensive side of things, I think that'd be really huge for the Canes.
mm,
And then especially with Sean Walker. Yeah, he's more defensively minded, but he's a good two-way player. Like he does put up some points too. So I think if those guys come in and gel really well with the team, I think that'd be kind of an X factor where you take a defense that's already good and you keep it good and maybe just make it that much better. Because
mm.
we already know they're a top five defense, even top three, and even penalty kill wise, they were first last
Yeah.
season again. So I think, yeah, right now it's that X factor of those two guys coming in to be your replacements and fitting into the special teams of power plays, penalty kills, and just even 5-on-5 play.
Mm. Yeah, those two guys are going to really be key for those. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, especially losing Pesci, who was a big part of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think, but I mean, Walker definitely can replace
Oh
him.
yeah, yeah.
So as we said,
Mm-hmm.
all right, let's talk prospects.
Okay.
Now there's not many guys and probably not many spots for these guys to push in,
Mm-hmm.
but you had a few NHL debuts at the end of the season for the
Mm-hmm.
Hurricanes that could potentially Sean Morrow, maybe.
Yeah.
Who do you think could surprise and make the team out of training camp?
I mean, Felix Ungerstorm might, but he's coming his first year over to North America. I would love to see him in Chicago, especially with Cam Abbott, who was the head coach of Rogla, um, of the SHL. So that's where Felix Ungerstorm come from. So I think it'd be kind of good to have him in Chicago, getting kind of your first year under your belt in Chicago in North America. Scott Morrow maybe on defense, but I think the defense is kind of already locked in as it is, and like you don't really want to give a rookie seventh man minutes. So I kind of see him down there too. Maybe Jackson Blake, but I'm not really sure how that's going to work out, especially where you're going to kind of put him maybe third line right wing if you kind of feel you want to put Jack Roslovic in the top
Mhm.
six. I've kind of already said it. Of course, got to plug the Hockey Writers with the website. I talk about how Brendan Nadeau I think has a legitimate shot.
Mhm.
The kid already has an NHL plus shot. We saw what he could do in Penticton, over 100 points in his last year. Did the same thing with his brother. He goes to Maine, sets an unbelievable scoring touch, most points, most goals, most assists by a guy for a black bear in I think it was like the mid 2000s that he was setting all these numbers. This was his first year, and it's like, all right, are you gonna sign my contract? Yes, he played in one game, was against the Jackets, was a -3, but it's the last game of the season. Who really cares at that point?
Mhm.
If you're talking about one guy who's probably going to make it out of camp that could surprise people, I think it's Bradley Nadeau.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I like, well, I love, again, the Hurricanes always draft these guys that I love
30th
Nadeau too. I don't
overall.
understand why he was
30th,
drafted.
30th overall pick. You got love.
Yeah,
It's like, hey, thanks. We'll take him at 30 back on the 23 draft and absolutely just
I
scorches the
just don't
NCAA board.
understand why what dropped so far. I thought he should have been drafted a lot higher.
Even
But
Jackson Blake dropped too, and we snagged him, and he was a Hobie Baker finalist for North Dakota. So I mean, either Nadeau or Blake could be really, really good in my opinion. I think those are
yeah.
the two guys to kind of keep an eye on.
One thing the Hurricanes have is a really great prospect pool for a team that always makes the playoffs, and that always just kind of it wows me. The Stars on the in the West are the Hurricanes of the West in
Yeah,
that where
I
they just
would.
seem to
Yeah,
just get guys.
yeah, I would big props to Darren York, who's the head of the amateur scouting department and just the amateur scouts in general. And of course, Darren York is also the assistant general manager for the Canes behind Eric Tulsky. But yeah, York and his amateur staff are really, really good at finding guys, especially in North America, also in Europe, but especially for the last couple of years, Russia.
Yeah, yeah,
They have,
that's true.
yeah, they have no problem finding some Russians, that's for sure.
All right, we'll keep on the prospects. Who should fans be watching this season, Prospect World? I mean, not doesn't necessarily have to make the team, but they do have all, like as we've talked about, the prospect pool is pretty good.
Yeah.
Who should everyone be watching outside of the NHL here?
I would say probably definitely keep an eye on Jackson Blake and how he does. Maybe he makes enough noise where he could probably make the team at some point, maybe November, December, depending on how the roster's going and maybe there's some injuries. Ungersorm, same thing. Kind of see how he does. Scott Morrow on the defense because he's kind of like your next man up for the defense if anything does
Mhm.
happen at some point. I could definitely see him maybe doing something down the road, maybe next year. If we're talking someone that we really need to keep an eye on, who I think is going to make the Hurricanes roster next season because he's got to finish this contract with SKA Moscow. Alexander Nikishin, you got to keep an eye out
Yeah,
on this kid. He's already considered probably the top three. I think there's some poll that came out where he was like top 10 of guys in the KHL. He's like one of the dudes. So yeah, I think he's like the number one or number two prospect for the Hurricanes. I think a lot of people have him at number one. But yeah, Alex Nikishin, keep an eye out for him how he does this year. But I know he's gonna make the Canes roster next year. And this kid is going to be a stud. Offensively gifted, defensively he just throws bodies. He's not afraid to throw the body at all. So yeah, I know it's kind of harder to watch some KHL games, but yeah, I would definitely keep out in Nikishin for
mm.
sure. If we're not talking North America, at least.
Yeah. Again, another great prospect they've got outside.
Another late one.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
insane,
It
insane.
just, but that's, great scouting, and that it doesn't
Yeah,
matter if you're a great team. And that's why you're a great team in the NHL. I mean,
yeah,
to get these guys and be able to, I mean, Seth Jarvis was another one,
yep.
way too late. He shouldn't have been drafted.
13th
I mean, he
overall.
was drafted
Thank you,
13th overall, but I
thank you,
thought he should have
Toronto
been
Maple
drafted
Leafs.
more.
Yeah, thank you, Toronto Maple Leafs for taking on the Patrick Marleau and giving us the Seth Jarvis at 13. So
Yeah. I
appreciate you for
don't, I thought he
that.
should have been in the top 10, but
Oh, 100%. Yeah, the where he's at now.
undersized.
Yeah, crazy.
Okay. Now this is probably an obvious maybe. Sebastian Aho is probably going to take the forward group, but who's going to lead the team in scoring on the forwards?
I'm actually going to surprise you, Matt. I think it's going to be Seth Jarvis. I
Yeah.
think he has a bit like. I mean, Aho almost had 90 points last year. He did finish with 89. Seth Jarvis finished kind of low, but of course he played first line and third line minutes with Jordan Stahl and Jordan Martin. But you give him first line minutes all year with Aho, I think those two guys kind of will push each other to have 80 plus points together. So I think Seth Jarvis might have a case to be like the guy for the forward group if it's not
Mm.
Sebastian Aho, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think those two are going to be 1-2 depending.
Defense, Shane Gostisbehere. I
Yeah.
know Brent Burns is there. He had kind of a down year. You could tell his age is kind of catching up to him. But Gostisbehere had 56 points last year on a really red hot Red Wings team that kind of dropped off as the season went on. But give him some decent minutes, put him on power play one, and he let him do his thing. I think he's going to lead the defense in
Mm.
points, and I think you could see him getting up into the mid 50s again, and who knows, maybe he might hit 60.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I would definitely put my money on Shane Gostisbehere in terms of leading the defense in points.
All right. Now to finish off, a bold prediction, hot take for this season.
In terms of the Hurricanes or just in general?
You can go each one.
Okay, Hurricanes. Ooh, hmm. I know we talk about transitional year, but I will say that the Hurricanes will. I think you're going to see them making the Eastern Conference Final this year. I think they're gonna. I think they're gonna make at least an Eastern Conference Final. Some people might not call that a bold prediction, but with how the roster, with all the transition that the team has right now, I think they might surprise people and make the Eastern Conference Final at least. I want to say Stanley Cup, but I don't want to go that far yet on the
Yeah.
on the hot
Yeah,
takes.
I like to.
In terms of the overall season, just in general, um, oh boy, um, I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see how it's gonna. I think the Sabres and the Red Wings will both make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I do see one of them making the
Mhm.
playoffs. I don't know about both. Both is a bold prediction, I think.
You asked for
That
bold.
Atlantic division is just
Oh gosh, yeah.
that one is going to be like every year, and every year I say this. You can probably
Hmm.
go back, and I probably said the same thing. That this division is going to become one of the best in like competitiveness in the next. I don't know. I wanted to say last season, but I guess that didn't happen. But I think
Yeah.
it's going to end up being where you're going to see either they're all going to be really, or they're just going to be a shift where the top, like the
Mhm.
Lightning, Maple Leafs, all of them will shift, and then you got the Sabres, Senators, Red Wings all at the top, and they're at the bottom. But
Yeah.
I think the Maple Leafs are going to end up being there at one point because their core is aging as much as what they say with
Too
Matthews
much.
is not young anymore.
No, it's too much,
So
too many pay raises for guys that just don't really, like we talk about insanity. You've hit the insanity button one too many times. One playoff series win in 8 years with this group. That's kind of tough. I mean, now with the Lightning, it'd be interesting how the Lightning do because you do lose Steven
yeah,
Stamkos, but you do get Jake Gensel, you do lose Sergachev, you do have Vasilevsky for the whole season possibly. So Boston, it'll
Boston's
be
a I have no idea every
they're
year.
so weird. That's just a weird team. They're such an enigma of like this team should fall off, but somehow doesn't fall off. But now you got
Yeah,
Elias Lindholm and a bunch of other guys you did bring in. Goaltending is going to be the biggest question because
yeah,
all you have is Swayman for now because that still isn't done either at this point.
yeah.
You Corpusalo, maybe I don't know. Yeah, it's just like that's why I'm saying Boston or not Boston. That's why I'm saying like Buffalo and Detroit might surprise people and maybe make
Yeah.
the playoff. Because let's be honest, Matt. Like let's say that the Metro only sends three teams in, and the Atlantic sends five. I
Mm,
don't know. Toronto, Boston, Tampa Bay, Florida, and maybe one of those four drop off, and let's say Detroit and Buffalo are right there. They could surprise someone and take one of those spots. Who really knows? But yeah, I don't like you said, one of them is going to make it if it's five, but both. You never.
that's
Hey,
a yeah,
hockey, baby.
that's right.
You never know.
No, no, it's gonna be interesting season
Yeah.
in the East. I mean the West too, but
Yeah.
the two divisions are really tough and really
Mhm.
competitive, and you never know what can happen every season. So
Yeah.
we'll see how the Hurricanes do. Thanks,
Yeah.
thanks Zach for coming on,
Yeah. Of
talking
course.
Hurricanes and previewing the season coming up. And hockey is, I don't know, depending on when you guys are watching this, it could be a week from now. So make sure to
Yeah.
check out all of our stuff at thehockeywriters.com. But it doesn't matter when it is.
Mhm.
We always pump out the content. We
Yeah.
got lots of great stuff already on the site previewing the season coming up. And also, we'll be covering all their stuff throughout the season as well. So make sure to checking out everything there and on the YouTube channel as we keep pumping out these videos and everything else. Make sure, and also the Substack, can't forget that. There's also
Yes.
that great stuff we have over there. Just a newsletter that gives you 2 to 3 times a week, depending on the team. Of all the content that we got and right to your inbox, and also the premium tier that we've got a group of writers that just write about bunch of different topics. So check that out in the description below. And until our next preview video, we'll see you next time.